Morning, everybody. I got a few teaching videos I'm working on, the regular teaching videos. And I believe I already did the Samuel 15 and a couple others. Now it's about 5. I got up at about 3 today. I want to cover a little bit more, and I want you to get the view. I want you to understand that the stuff you're seeing me talk about, all of this is a very long history. One of my friends, you've not seen, I don't think he's ever been on video. This is an old case, but his name is Mark Baker. Okay, Mark is the cook at Timmons, and Mark is a friend of mine. And when I was doing the halfway house with David Martin, David Martin and all those guys, for years they, were on the streets, struggling with drug addiction. A lot of my friends, but Mark also got away from that life, and he's got a full-time job as a cook for the mission that you see me at sometimes. So Mark, sometimes I talk to Mark, and if they got extra food donated to Timmons that they couldn't use, like whole bags of rice, he told me, John, we'll never use this. Would you like to take it to the halfway house? Or one year they donated like a bunch of candy, maybe after Halloween, and gave me a big bag of candy. I said, Mark, I'll take it, and the guys used it, So he felt, he was helping. Well, I was still working at the fire department, I believe, at this time, because I remember the name. I did not look up this case. This might be maybe 10 years back. But there was 2 kids, and I believe they were from out of town, but one of them was stabbed right here where I live, in Flower Bluff, and he was killed. Now, I remember the name, believe it or not. Sam Moore. Sam Moore. I don't remember if he's a black kid or what, but because they were not from here, I think they might have been college kids. But he was stabbed and murdered. So that type of, homicide, because maybe they were from out of town and all, is that you want to solve that. So maybe a week went by or a few days. This was something that they had to solve, regardless of if they had anybody that actually did it. You see, they have a history of this. They have a history of the guy telling. They have a history. Because I saw it in the news, we made the arrest. It was Mark Baker. I saw Mark's face, felony arrest, a violent assault. Now, I was not, the violent task force went. I heard the story, though I wasn't at Timmons that day. They showed up in full force, guns ablazing, not shooting, but out, and went into the back and threw his ass on the ground. We got you, mother effer. He was in shock. So I saw his face on the news. Murderer, killer, Mark Baker, criminal. We got him. They knew it was not him. They knew it was not him. Why they picked him, I don't know. But they were going to go ahead, maybe try him in a death penalty case. Of course, he was in shock. And they held him for maybe 4 days. And the media asked some questions. And I think it was the representative I mentioned. His father used to be a city manager. I think Kirk Stowers was being questioned by the media, like, what's going on now? Because there was some questions. The only reason they let him go was the real murderer, on his own accord, who I met, went to the police station, basically said, you're framing him because I'm the one who did it. They were not concerned with getting the person who did it. Gaetan. They were ready to lie, dissimulate, assault an innocent citizen violently, because they would have preferred, because the public, it was an unsolved killing of Sam Moore. Now, when the guy went in and said, look, I did it, I wonder, I don't even know if they like, oh, now we got to get the right guy. We didn't figure somebody would actually come in and confess to the murder. We just figured we'd go with whoever we decided to pick that month. So, and they did not want that to happen because they had to go publicly. They were forced to release Mark Baker, knowing he was innocent, knowing they picked him out of the hat, because they were later questioned by the media. How did that, and they covered that up. They picked him out of the hat is what they did. But they were forced to have to let Mark Baker go after maybe 4 days in prison. Face all over the media. We caught that bastard murderer. Because the other guy came in and confessed. So they had to release Mark Baker, my friend. Now the other man said that those two kids, younger guys, tried to rob him or something, and it was self-defense. They did arrest the other man. If he didn't come on his own accord, they would have went full force. They would have suborned witnesses who lied. Look, that's a history here. Do you understand this? They would have got people to say, we saw Mark, just say it, that this is how they operate. I don't consider this, I consider what they do criminal here. Now, the other guy was held in jail for months until it went before grand jury, and I remember they did not indict because I believe it was sort of like a self-defense. They were going to rob him. Now, everybody on the street knew, because just everyone said, the other man, it wasn't, they knew. They were just picking somebody. And one day when I was helping Huey, years later, Huey lived where the guy who actually murdered Sam Moore lived. And Huey said, oh, John, I told him like you're a minister and all, and he just wants to talk to you. And about life, I guess. And he told me, and he's the one that, murdered that kid, Sam Moore. And I said, oh, I'll talk to him. And I just met him, and I told him, hey, I do ministry, brother, and he was just dealing with issues. He wanted to talk like he wanted to talk to a court of priest or something like that type thing, which was fine. If it wasn't for his honesty to go in, they would have went full force. Now, the thing that bothered me again, this is such a history. Another friend of mine, Andy, told me, he said, they're following Mark now, Mark Baker, for a period of time. The cops. Why would they do that? Because the media then, he had a civil rights violation on him. Because the media began asking, wait a minute, you had a warrant and this and that, and they never fully explained what they did in that case. And so, in order, because they did wrongdoing, if you're an innocent citizen and they just pick you, and I believe what the cops did, they probably used the violent task force. I don't know if they're corrupt, but they probably, oh yeah, we got the guy, and then have them go in and do that arrest. And it was like I said, guns out and all type thing. But they wanted to put Mark Baker on notice. Don't you ever try to defend your civil rights, which we violated. And so maybe we'll follow you for a year. Maybe we'll park in front of your house. I don't see any of that. I see that as an official oppression carried out as criminals. Because it took time for Mark, for people to stop talking about that, and his face was on murderer caught, state news, Texas, this vicious killer, all the time knowing he was not the one. But they were going to move forward with it. So when I saw the Gaetan cases, realizing that they know that they're just building cases and using lies and all, and thinking that that's, quote, catching crooks. Henry Schultz. You've seen Henry on video. Henry is a good man. Henry's a good Christian man. But he does look the part of the homeless. But he's a very sweet Christian brother, Henry. But one day, he wanted to tell me, before I heard, like, from the grapevine, he said, "Oh, John, I wanted to tell you, I could tell you one." He said, "The cops put the cuffs on me last night." This was a few years ago. And I was surprised. I said, "Oh, what happened, Henry?" He was just standing at HEB. And sometimes people panhandle. Henry does not panhandle, okay? He doesn't ask for money. He's a very good man, Henry. But I remember one time, Officer Nichols, I was with Henry, and he just came up to Henry. "So it's you." These guys have been under oppression for a long time. So I asked Henry, "Why'd they put the handcuffs on you, Henry?" "No reason at all. Just to let you know that here in this city, we'll assault without cause, we'll arrest without cause, and we want to keep the populace under the understanding that if we decide we're going to handcuff you, we handcuff you. If we put notice out, which has been put out, we arrest you on sight without cause." Knowing that they told these guys that and had done that. I don't see any of this as law enforcement. I see that some of them might be younger, that all of them are not doing it, but many are. And that's just another one. I could give you so many. And so seeing it for so long at the firehouse, if you had guys that were like a little bit of, you work at different times on different shifts. And I told one of my friends once, I said, "You want to be in it for the long haul," my friend Joe, because we had other guys get hired, and after 5 years, 6 years, they want to get on another fire department. I would tell Joe, and he took my advice. I said, "Joe," I said, "the way you make it here," I said, "first of all, you put priority on our jobs." I said, "A lot of the guys are involved in all the union politics, and then it's taking them 3-5 minutes to get into the fire truck or the ambulance when a call comes in." I said, no. The main thing is you get in that unit fast. I was a stickler for that. Fast response time. Do your job. I said, and second, I said, if you sometimes guys quit because they don't want to work under a captain or a certain supervisor that maybe is like retaliating or something, like, "I'm going to make you do this." I said, "The way you survive, Joe, is you come 25 years doing this type of job." I said, it's not all the excitement that initially people think when they get hired at a fire department. "Oh, I want to go on a run." I remember one of the new guys once, like, he was there a year, maybe 2 years, and they had a big fire. But on that fire, I had missed. I was out on another run or something. And they were like, "Oh, you missed it." I said, "Oh, I do." It's like you get used to going to fires, but they were like, "Oh, it was so exciting." I said, "Yes, but if you're going to make a job like that," I said, "it's really consistency. You show up, you do your job." I said, "And if you're working under somebody, some guys will eventually move on because they can't stand the captain or the engineer." I said, "You learn that when you're on duty, you put up with that oppression if you feel it's that way." What you have in police departments is their job is that's the same dynamic. That's what I understood. This is how I've learned. It's the same dynamic as if you were working under a captain or whatever. But then they show up on your block. They follow you all over town. If they make a false arrest on you, they follow your ass. This is official oppression that they do, which is highly illegal. They seem to not be concerned with the law. When you see these black kids, there's these riots going on in Milwaukee now. Many of the public have not actually experienced some of that. My friend, for instance, Mark, had nothing to do with any criminal activity. he cleaned his life up and he was doing a job and they arrested him at work, but then they put him on notice. And the media had asked at the time, because there was wrongdoing there. I remember there was a particular question, wait a minute, you had a warrant here, and they never answered it. There was some law broken in that. But besides that, when I heard they kept following him for a period of time, all over, just to put him on notice that yes, we violated the law, in some area they did things wrong, we threw you down, we showed up at your workplace with guns ablazing, we splattered your face, and they knew it was not him. They knew it was not him. But they had to, it was pressure to do an arrest, so they figured he might be the closest thing. I think the name might have been Mark or something, but everybody knew, and if that other man that actually stabbed Sam Moore and killed him did not come forward, and I wonder if they regretted the fact that the real killer, on his own accord, walked in to the police station and said, I'm the one, because he kind of threw their plan off. And you say, but John, wouldn't they have maybe, the DA and the cops, wouldn't they have been happy to have known they got the wrong one? No, because it makes them look bad. It's quite obvious in the Gaetan case that they framed that boy. And as the process went forward and to coerce a false testimony out of a man by the name of Valent, it's quite obvious they did that. And when it became public, you'd think they would say, we did wrong. But they're fighting him. He's become the enemy to them, because it might hinder their career. All of that is a tremendous injustice. I consider that criminal. When I told you about the assault case and all, that was an officer that was not making an arrest. It was a retaliation. But that was not new, because one of my friends I was helping, who is a friend, is not a street person, said, oh, you know, Tommy also told someone else if they give him trouble, he'll take his uniform off and beat the shit out of that person. Look, this has been going on for years. And in a normal city, you would assume that Matt, my friend Matt, I think I just reposted Matt on an old video because I'm reposting it. But he had told me one time that that officer had, I remember that name, that he had a goon squad. I used to not believe Matt. But Matt said it was him and a group of guys that he had, and they went around mugging people. Now, I just could not believe this was true. And then they said they moved him to the other side of town, but they had assaulted some people over there, and that they had to break up whatever unit it was. When I first heard that from Matt, because I've heard this a lot, but then I knew, yes, how could you do that? How could you run a department in that manner? I believe that they would shoot a witness. Initially, I wouldn't believe that they would actually kill a person in a cold-blooded murder. I've come to believe that they would do that. I've come to believe that they would do that if they could get away with the murder of a witness, that they would do that. Now you say, John, do you have proof of that? Well, I used to not believe any of the stories, and then I've come to believe many of them. Okay? And so and no, I don't have proof of that ever taking place. But the Mark Baker just came to my mind this morning, and I thought I would share it. Now I'm going to do some more teaching, but I want you to see, this is not like a one-time incident. And when I began to see, like in some of these cases that have become public, I realized if you're a DA or a police department and you're spending a lot of time covering up for things that you've done, suborning of false testimony, and then retaliating against people and all, the average person, when they move to a region, it's important that they know that they're going to deal with stuff like that. You say, oh, well, they don't arrest innocent people off the... Look, Mark Baker, okay? Mark Baker. It doesn't have to be... You don't have to be involved in the actual crime. If they pick a name, they'll go after that name. If they have to have a mark, for instance. The case in Aransas Pass that I gave you of that boy named, I forget his name now, but this is documented. They went in, they thought they had a warrant on some boy, but it was the wrong one, a 20-something-year-old kid. But they went and assaulted that kid, arrested all the witnesses, sworn testimony. But because they got the wrong kid, they planted pot on the kid, and but they're still going after him. And then it was exposed. The media even did an expose on it, and finally asked the police chief in that Aransas Pass. They said, look, we got evidence you framed that kid, assaulted that kid. And their answer was, prove it. Proof, you see, in a municipality is you call the police department. We have a crime. And if the police department says, okay, give me your name, then they refer it to a DA. Or they show up at that person's house and say, now, what officer was it that you were reporting again? We would suggest you don't report you're being assaulted anymore because you're way south here. And we do business a lot different in this part of the country. And maybe you, Mr. Yankee, or whoever, maybe you're new to this region. But we're just letting you know before we have to do our full process on you. Don't you ever report an assault or a crime by an officer again. We'll put you on notice here. And then I'm sure the person like that family, I think they were military, they were afraid to report that the cops would not show up when they had a break-in and entering on the island, but on their way out, like getting stationed somewhere else, they finally went to the media and said, no, they didn't come. This particular division in Florida Bluff. So I don't see any of this as like the average person watches the TV and thinks, oh, you know, that's the Mark Baker case. And it came to my mind, and the boy that was killed, was stabbed, was Sam Moore. Okay? That's just one. You could look that up. And there was questions at the time, because they did wrongdoing, and the media was trying. All right. And we'll do this. I'll post this right away, and then I'm going to work on the regular teaching video. Okay? I've been reading Isaiah, and I like Isaiah. A lot of the prophets, Isaiah, and God says, God magnifies His office through the people of God, through the church. That righteous, Martin Luther King used to quote, I think it was Micah, but that righteousness would roll down. And I know a lot of my preacher friends, what I would like to impart would be, in Scripture there's a theme that says, you don't just speak the words of Jesus, but you exemplify the life of Jesus. And a big part of it is to do justice. You see, it's to do justice. Many times in ministry, I had an old Hispanic man at Coffee Waves. A few years ago, I was working he's from this area, and somehow I was just working on the computer, and I said, I do a Christian website, but I deal with like issues and all, and I mentioned to him that somehow he talked about the police in this area. I think the man was a teacher, like a professor or something, older man. And I said, well, you know, I try to deal with cop issues. He immediately said, they will go after you. Now, how can an older man that's been here all these years, how could he have that experience? When I'm driving sometimes on Crosstown Expressway, there's an old house, and it looks kind of nice. Like I could use it to have. I've seen it for years. I guess that man has had experience with the police department here, because he has like big signs. You know, they don't. Maybe they're not internet savvy, but the big signs are like the cops are crooks, this and that. Maybe he had some experience. I don't know. Speak Truth, you know, sort of like the El Defensor, which is a Hispanic publication that deals with issues. And I thought, you know, those were people that have had experiences that they feel they need to have expression. Now, for my preacher friends, I'll end with this. It says in Micah, the Lord has shown thee, O man, how to do justice, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly. And the biggest part of many preachers feel it's courageous, like to preach some doctrine that they feel is true, but maybe they would get flack for they feel like just preaching the words of Jesus, but without exemplifying truth or doing justice, because that's the biggest inherent fear. Like, I will be a target if I speak out. If you have people in your congregations, you're supposed to be a voice. If you see injustice taking place, whether it's around the world or within this country, or you're supposed to have a voice. That's a big requirement of your calling. And you do your best. You do your best to speak what's true. And if you know, oh, there's some injustice that took place, you know, within Corpus Christi, and you know, and maybe you're nice and you say, I'm going to pray for the law enforcement. Look, pray for law. I pray for the president. I pray for all in authority. I pray for the CCPD. Believe me, because that's all part of my regular intercession. But when I see like these things are swept under the rug, do you understand? It upsets me that Gaitan is in jail. Because when I saw all of the case, I understood that the only reason he's in jail is because the detectives worked in collusion with Mark Skirka to coerce false testimony from the only witness in the case. And how the jury could have convicted Gaitan, because in his case, and I just read it like anybody in the newspaper or watched it on TV as well. Gaitan had a vehicle, the kid, he's involved in a gang, this kid. But he had a vehicle and he had a gun that night. Now, a lot of kids have vehicles and guns. So, that came out in court. That was part of the evidence. But Valent initially, he's the key witness, the only evidence really that convicted Gaitan. And when the cops first interviewed Valent said he was like the father of, or grandfather. 2 young kids were shot. And look, we want that to be resolved correctly, not just get somebody. But Mr. Valent told the officers, this came out, but they had to get this out, because the cops and DA tried to hide all of this. And they get a freedom of information request. Look, you're not dealing with honesty. Because they finally released the report, this came out in the paper, that when they interviewed Valent, he told them straight out, look, I did not see anybody, or I cannot give you an idea of anybody. But then they said, the cops said, but Mr. Valent changed his mind. But what you didn't see, and the cops did not tell you, is in the interview they went back to him and said, look, we know who did it, but we need somebody to just ID him. Okay, but it's him for sure. He had the gun and the car and all this. And then Valent said, okay, maybe I know, maybe it was him 50% or 70%, something like that. Well, cops went back and said, what we need is 100% ID. So it went from he swore he didn't know who shot at that party to maybe 70% to I'm 100% sure. That was the evidence that convicted Gaitan. That. But the cops and DA did not want you to see that they had done that. I consider that official oppression. I, you have to do what is just. You have to do what is right. You don't just pick somebody because we need to solve it, because we need a certain amount of convictions. So I just cannot view what they do. I see different things happen that maybe you haven't seen in the public. So I don't view them the way maybe a normal person would view. I see an undercurrent that takes place in this region because of a lot of my involvement with friends, besides all the other things that they've told me over the years. So for those in ministry, be concerned if you really think that somebody's sitting in jail every day because they had to find somebody. And how the jury convicted that kid, because they used as evidence he had a gun. Now, John, wouldn't that be good evidence? But the gun, by ballistics, by their own police ballistics, state used, it was not the gun. But they still said, but still, that's evidence. The gun that the boy Gaitan had was not the gun used at the shooting. But they still said, but it was a gun anyway, and therefore that's part of the evidence. That should be part of the evidence that he's not guilty, because they still had all the other witnesses say Gaitan was in the car that night with the gun. Now, Mr. Valent also gave an identification of the vehicle, and it was not the vehicle that Gaitan was in. Valent said he gave a description of a vehicle, but that vehicle he described was not the vehicle Gaitan was in that night. But they still used that as evidence, but he was in a vehicle. How the jury could do that? And if Mr. Skirka thinks, look, we have juries that do that type of stuff here, maybe he goes with that. You should be more concerned with your future. The man who did the Michael Morton case, that prosecutor, he's going to face a tremendous judgment before God for what he did. And his life is, he's an older man now. All right? So I want you to view that. The teaching thing, I might get it up tomorrow. But I want you to see that. I want you to see all of these things. Jesus said, you shouted on the housetops. There are people that these crimes by people in official capacity have committed against people here for many years. And these people live in fear because they know, quote, we put the cuffs on you whenever we want to put the cuffs on you, Mr. Schultz. And how dare you ever question us? It was Huey Martin that Tommy Nichols said, if I ever see you, Huey Martin, on the street, I arrest you without cause. He told him, leave Flower Bluff and never come back. And I think Huey went and lived in Aransas Pass. He said, but John, this was my hometown. And he came back a few months later. As soon as Tommy saw him, get in the effing cop car, arrested him without cause. And that's not one, that's hundreds. And then the impression on the TV is that they have discipline in the department. And I know from all of this, they've taken like the oppressive, quote, fire captain that you might have to work under for the shift. And my advice to my friends is, if you're working for, but they brought that to the streets. We park down your block, we follow you, we pursue you. We get word on the street that we're coming after you. All the time that you spend doing that. And then I see the sad cases of the women that are trying to go to the cops and they say, we're so busy doing our jobs, we can't, on the weekends we can't have the domestic, because we're so swamped with trying to do righteousness. And to me, I think, what hypocrisy. What hypocrisy. You got like gang kids working in that department that are out like, oh, we're doing our thing today. That's my view of it. That's my view of it.